I'm Morgan Davis. I'm First Vice President here at the FCC. And with us today, of course, needs no introduction, but we have Thomas Gnocchi. He's the outgoing head of the EU office in Hong Kong and Macao. He's leaving us very soon for Japan, so we're very privileged to have him here to talk to us a little bit about his 4 years in Hong Kong, where he sees Hong Kong and EU's relationship, and hopefully we can be a bit forward-looking as well. So I have a number of questions that I will, of course, kick us off with, but I'm sure there's questions in the audience too. So I'll be sure to save some time at the end, and we'll have microphones that go around to get your questions. So please keep those in mind as we start talking. So thank you, Tom, again for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Morgan. It's a real pleasure to address the FCC Club Lunch. I think this is my last public event before leaving, so
Excellent.
I'm particularly happy that this is taking place here at the FCC. And I see a lot of friends and colleagues, so glad to see you all before I leave.
Excellent. Well, you came to Hong Kong in 2020, which is a wild time to start your Hong Kong adventure. What would you say has characterized your 4 years in the city?
I think it would have been even wilder had I come the year before, but obviously 2020, it was right in the middle of the pandemic. And I would say for over half of my posting here, we were dealing with the pandemic. So that's, I think, the first thing to say. We were working a lot together, not only our office, but with the consulates of the EU member states here in Hong Kong. We were working a lot on conveying the concerns of EU citizens here, of EU companies, of EU airlines. That was a particular issue that we were dealing with, conveying these concerns to the government, and I hope with some success. I think it was a difficult period for everyone, but finally and thankfully we got out of that. But that was well over half of my posting here, so I think I'll always remember it for that. Then obviously there were the big political changes. So I came 2 months after the imposition of the national security law, and then there were further changes down the line, the changes to the electoral framework, and more recently the Article 23 legislation. So that I think was also characterized my posting here, and I think my job in the EU office here was very, very different to that of my predecessors, which weren't dealing with these more, call them political topics. But I would say that these now we're out of the pandemic, but the political changes I think have changed Hong Kong quite a bit, even in this relatively short period of time.
Yes, I know in a recent interview you said, whereas Hong Kong used to be an open society, it is no longer an open society. Can you expand on that a little bit and tell us, what do you mean? What has changed that you've noticed?
Well, I'd say the main thing I think is, or to put it another way, I think it's the ability of the city, of a society to have plurality of views and opinions. I think that has changed considerably because of mainly I would say the impact of the security legislation. That has been the biggest change. And this has and also the resulting self-censorship that there is in different areas, not only in the media. So I would say that's probably the main thing, and this obviously has an impact on Hong Kongers, the fundamental freedoms that they are supposed to enjoy, but also on Europeans living here as well.
Mm-hmm. What have you noticed in that regard, as far as the self-censorship and kind of the shifting of views that are shared?
Well, I mean, just an example, in interviews that I have, I've had several instances where a reporter says, well, we can't really carry that. So we've that is, I've seen it firsthand, this self-censorship, and in terms of interviews I've had, and also you have civil society, many not, there was a thriving civil society in Hong Kong. There is still a lot of civil society, but quite a number of civil society organizations have closed down, mainly the ones dealing with more advocacy or political issues. They've been forced to close down. Independent media have closed down. So this has all had an impact on what I was saying earlier about kind of the diversity of different views.
Do you think any of this is reversible? Could we see any of this change?
Well, I think theoretically, yes, it's reversible, but it would take something pretty substantial to roll this back. I think it would be obviously in the, call it the political sphere, that would require things. I mean, one thing, I think I mentioned this in one of the interviews, is there's been a strong focus on security. This is stemming from the basic law, but there are other parts of the basic law, and I'm thinking the provisions on universal suffrage. That would be, I think, go a long way in terms of rolling this back. Another example is we're approaching the 1 year since the Court of Final Appeal, the ruling on an alternative framework for same-sex relationships. This sort of thing, which would form part of a kind of what constitutes an open society, and I think the EU would welcome changes in these areas for sure.
Yes, yeah, I know the EU in general has been pretty critical of the security laws, and as you have said, has questioned kind of the impact on the rights of the people and the attractiveness of Hong Kong as well as an international business hub that it's always been. So do you see that role of Hong Kong shifting? Is the effects that we're talking about changing how the city is positioned?
Well, it's true. We've expressed concerns both in relation to the national security law and more recently the Article 23 legislation. In terms of the attractiveness of Hong Kong for business, looking at the European business community, I think there's still is a very strong presence of Europe in general, European citizens working in all walks of life here. When it comes to business, we have, if you put all the European Union companies together, and as EU representative, I like doing that. The EU companies are the largest foreign business community in Hong Kong, leaving aside mainland companies. There was a slight dip following the pandemic, but in general, European companies have a strong presence here and see a lot of advantages to doing business in Hong Kong, and we would like to see this maintained, and we hope the environment will continue to be conducive for these companies, and beyond the companies, for European citizens working here and living here to thrive in. But some of these changes have had an impact.
And has there been an impact on any types of business in particular? I know we talk a lot about the financial sector in Hong Kong, but certainly there's many areas that we have European businesses.
Well, I think, it really depends on it's hard to generalize, but I think it really depends on what sort of sector you're in. But I think if you're dealing with data, there could be some concerns. I think one of the characteristics of Hong Kong and why Hong Kong is very attractive to foreign companies is the rule of law, at least in the commercial field, and companies want to see this, the strong role of the judiciary, at least in the commercial sphere, to see this maintained. But I have heard some concerns here and there, so hopefully this won't change.
Mm-hmm. We were talking a bit over lunch about hiring practices. What have you seen as far as the individuals maybe coming from Europe and the hiring and residency here?
Yeah, I think that's another big factor. I think Hong Kong going forward has to make sure that there's an environment that they're able to hire people and talent from all over the world, including Europe. I think this is very, very important. So obviously it's a lot to do with the business environment, but there are other factors too, going beyond the business environment, that are important. So hopefully these conditions will be in place. Yeah.
And press freedom is, of course, a big topic. You've already alluded to that. What is your general sense of the state of press freedom in Hong Kong, and how has that shifted in your 4 years here?
Well, we have a big case coming up next week with Stand News. This is one of the cases which the EU office, together with representatives of consulates from the EU member states, are observing, and I think this will be very, very crucial. I think what I was saying earlier about many independent media organizations having to close down, this has had a big effect on media freedom. The issue of self-censorship, which I mentioned earlier. If you look at our reports, I think we say that there's media freedom or press freedom is under pressure, and for these reasons. And I think it's not only us, but there are a number of indices and surveys which convey this as well, this concern on press freedom, including, I think the FCC did a survey amongst its members, and there was I think a majority saying that they engaged in self-censorship. So this is also rather concerning as well.
Have you received any feedback from European journalists in the city? Any concerns about the access that they've been getting?
Not particularly from European journalists, no.
Okay.
Yeah. But as I said before, there have been instances where, in relation to media activities I've engaged in, it's been conveyed to me, no, this is something we can't carry. Even things which I would say are relatively uncontroversial or not particularly sensitive. So I've had this experience.
I'll turn it back again to kind of the possibilities of the future. Is this something that we could see any changes on? What steps would you think are necessary to send a stronger message about the state of press freedom in Hong Kong?
Well, I think the general realization that a thriving media environment, press freedom that's truly an environment where there's true press freedom, I think is good in many ways, not least also for business and for many organizations that rely on objective news and in general free information. So that's steps taken in that direction, I think, would be very, very welcome.
I'll shift us to a more positive note. One of the areas where the EU and Hong Kong have really been collaborating is with sustainability. And there's a lot of opportunity in that space. Can you tell us a little bit about the work that has been done and the opportunities for cooperation there?
Yeah, I think it's it's very important to highlight that despite the differences of views on the political issues, there are many areas that we've been working with the Hong Kong government and the authorities here, and probably one of the biggest ones has been in the whole environment and sustainability field. And there it comes down to the fact that the EU and Hong Kong share the same headline goal of decarbonization or climate. Hong Kong calls it carbon neutrality. We go perhaps a step forward, we call it climate neutrality by 2050. So this is the overall headline goal, and I think there are many areas where we can work on. We've had a series of conferences which we call the Green Way, and we've had 3 in my time here, and the last one was attended by the chief executive. So we were very happy that he was able to attend our event and take forward the sustainability issue. I think there's been quite a lot of progress in this field in Hong Kong, pointing to decarbonization of the energy mix here, looking at the penetration of electric vehicles, which is actually very, very good. The ban on single-use plastics, all these things are very, very positive. There are other areas where I think we certainly we're willing to work further on. I mean, Hong Kong is an international financial center, so the whole area of green finance, that's particularly important. Recycling rates are quite low, and when you look at the issue of the waste charging scheme, I think that shows areas where there's further work to be done. One specific area, and this is particularly important because is energy efficiency and green buildings, which in Hong Kong, because of the high penetration of electric vehicles, because of the fact that there's no heavy industry, and means that buildings actually make up 60% of Hong Kong's emissions. So that's a key area. And it's an area where we can work both in terms of standards, European standards on energy efficiency. I know that Hong Kong is interested in looking at those. Mainland China is also has been inspired by what's happened in terms of standards on energy efficiency. But there's also the role of companies, because I think EU companies working in this area are particularly competitive, so there's also a role for our companies. So this is, I think, a good example of areas we can cooperate on.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit more about those opportunities for companies? Is that directly in Hong Kong? What are you envisioning in that area?
Well, yeah, I would say directly in Hong Kong. There are many, just for example, there's some very big public works projects coming up, Northern Metropolis, for example. The idea is, and we hope that they will be truly sustainable projects. And as I said, I think there's an important role which European companies, which have very good and competitive technology in the field of the environment, can play an important part in those projects.
And certainly you alluded to the financial part of this, and we talked globally and at the COP meetings about the need for private finance when it comes to sustainability. So where is the opportunity for investment? What are you seeing as far as collaboration and cross-border investment when it comes to Europe and Hong Kong?
Again, you can divide that between the kind of the standards part. So, for example, working on green taxonomy and the whole discussion that there is on the standard side, and then on the actual doing part, and where we have many many European banks, obviously, present in Hong Kong, and a lot of them are engaged in green finance. And if you look at the amounts of money which will be needed, which run into the trillions, which are needed worldwide for the green transition, I think Hong Kong as a financial center clearly should play a key part in mobilizing this funding.
Mm-hmm. And I understand there's been cooperation between regulators and looking at some of these standards and really internationalizing them.
Yeah. This is one, both at the EU level, then at EU-wide level, and also at national level. There are conversations ongoing on these issues. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the EU. There's of course been a recent election. Politics are changing there. What do you think the effects of that have been on the relationship between the EU and Hong Kong?
Yeah, we are now between administrations in a way. We're at the tail end of the current European Commission. There will be following the European Parliament elections, which you mentioned, there will be a new European Commission coming in under Ursula von der Leyen. She's being confirmed for a second mandate at the end of the year. So we're in between two administrations. There's, I think, at least in one member state, there are, let's say, an evolving situation in terms of political situation, but one of the first things we're taught is not to talk about, as EU officials, not to talk about the political situation in individual member states. I have at least one colleague, but I'm not going to talk about Irish politics. So we're kind of there's in between and waiting for a new administration. I think it's fair to say that there's been a stronger showing for parties on the right side of the spectrum following the European Parliament elections. In terms of EU-China or EU-Hong Kong relations, I can't really tell you too much, except that I don't think there will be major changes in respect to EU-Hong Kong or EU-China relations. I think there will be still this framework of where there are concerns. We will voice these concerns, but also looking at areas where we can collaborate, and we just spoke about those. And another, at least here in Hong Kong, another area where we've done some work, but I think we should do much more, is on people-to-people exchanges, scholarships, and really to increase the exchanges between, especially young people, Europeans coming here, and vice versa, Hong Kongers going to Europe. So, in short, I think there shouldn't be too many changes going forward. That's my prediction.
That people-to-people relationship, as you noted, is we really missed out on for a few years during COVID, since because of the lockdown and the lack of travel everywhere. What do you find as far as the people in Europe, their attitudes about Hong Kong and China? Do you find any pervasive attitudes or understandings?
Well, I think some of the big the headlines have caught the attention. So when you talk about Hong Kong in Europe, then some of the recent political changes, those have been those spring to mind, and that's why I think it's important to see. Whereas, as I said, we will continue to voice concerns where we have these. It's also important to see the other side, and that's where people-to-people exchanges and seeing what Hong Kong has to offer in other areas. That's important, and that's why we want to engage in this, as well as what I was saying earlier about talent. Often students that come here for a short stay end up staying and having a whole career here, so, and vice versa. And I think, but equally, I find that there's, just as there may be misperceptions in Europe about Hong Kong, it's true the other way around, that often when talking to Hong Kongers, they have I think, a rather distorted view of what the situation in Europe is like as well. So it's important to go to have exchanges in both directions.
Oh, what are you seeing as far as the numbers go in that regard? Are we seeing an increase again after COVID, particularly with students coming or going?
Yeah, these have picked up. I think not to the extent that we had prior to the pandemic in terms of tourists and students. I don't have exact figures, but I think we still have to reach pre-pandemic levels. The number of companies, European companies here, is slightly below what we had pre-pandemic. And that's I think the dip has been much less than other Western countries. So I can say that there's been perhaps a bit more resilience on the side of European companies.
Well, before I open it up to questions, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about some of your favorite Hong Kong experiences. Has any really jumped out to you?
Well, the food has been a particular highlight, and spending time in the FCC. And I've tried to balance the food by walking in the great country parks, which are just around the corner. So that is something I'll really miss about Hong Kong. The fact that you have this international financial center, and you walk 2 minutes, and you're in a country park. So that certainly I'll miss that a lot. But yeah.
Do you feel we've prepared you for your Japan trip?
Yeah. Yeah, there's good food in Japan too, so I'm not out of the woods yet.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Sham. Why don't we open up and take some questions? I'm sure. Oh, I already see a hand over here, Nigel. If you can just introduce yourself.
Hello, Nigel Sharman, associate member. You mentioned airlines before. Airlines obviously are cutting back their services to Hong Kong and China, mainland China at the moment. Obviously, the Ukraine situation has a lot to do with that, but do you see that coming back, once hopefully that's resolved?
Do you take one by one, or?
One by one, yes.
Okay. I can't think about that one.
If you need a moment, we can take a moment.
No, I think obviously during the pandemic there were very specific issues we had to address, and I think we were able to solve some of them, not all of them. But just like tourist numbers aren't back, I think airline, and in particular European airlines aren't, or routes to Europe aren't fully back yet. My hometown is Rome, and there used to be a Cathay Pacific direct flight to Rome, and that's not back yet. So it would be great. I don't know if you can say these things on there. It would be great if that were back. But in terms of the evolving, I'm not an airline expert, so I can't tell you. Certainly, you're right about the war in Ukraine. The fact that airlines have to, in some cases, fly even 2-3 hours more. But I think if tourist numbers were to pick up again, then the tourist and business numbers would come back, and then I think the airlines would follow. That's what I would say as a layman in this area.
Are you seeing the appeal for tourists in Hong Kong? How have the effects of the campaigns post-COVID been?
I would have to say that the overall effect, as I said, is that tourist numbers, and certainly those from Europe, aren't fully back. I hope they will be soon. I can't tell you how much of an effect these campaigns have had. In terms of EU, we're in a way one step removed from our tourists and citizens, so I'm not in direct contact with them, and I can't tell you if any of them saw a campaign and said, we saw this campaign and decided to come to Hong Kong. That I can't tell you, but so I wouldn't be able to answer that specifically.
Great. Yes, another question back here.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm Emily Lau of the Democratic Party, and I want to tell Ambassador Gnocchi, some of us are going to miss you. And my question actually is a follow-up to Madam Chair's question. It's about the economy of Hong Kong, because the bad news have not been censored, because we see it everywhere. They cannot censor them, because the catering sector, the retail, construction, they are all screaming. And of course, we want to have more tourists, we want to have more investors coming here. But it seems, especially our traditional trading partners in the West, many are not coming, and some countries have actually issued travel advisories. So that's why their citizens are not coming. So Tom, you're a good friend of Hong Kong, and you know the difficulties that we face right now. And I certainly hope your comments will not be censored. What do you think we can do to help to boost the economy? I think many people in this room would be concerned. And I am concerned. I don't want to see people losing their jobs or having their pay cut, or with all these other things. The banks are now calling loans, so people are very, very distressed. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, this is, if we had the answer, I think it's a whole mix of different factors. And as far as Europe, at least, I think there's been, as I say, we still have a strong position in Hong Kong. There's been a dip, as I said, post-pandemic, and I hope we recover this. But there's a number of different factors, in particular the situation in the mainland, the economic situation in the mainland, where Hong Kong's economy is closely tied to that in the mainland. So it's a question of seeing that situation resolved as well, and then maybe because of the dip in terms of relations with or some dip in the figures for other markets, I think there's been even more of a reliance on mainland China. So when the economy in mainland China is not doing so well, Hong Kong feels it. So these are all factors that play a part. I think as I said, we would like to get to a position where we not only recover our position as in terms of number of companies, in terms of trade, we were the second largest trading partner of Hong Kong. We are now the third largest, so we've slipped a little. Again, I hope we recover this position. I think it's quite a complex situation, and there's no single simple answer, I'm afraid.
Just to follow up on that for everyone, when we're talking trade, what in particular is the most important parts of trade?
What I was going to mention and didn't forgot is that actually trade and services is doing very, very well, despite the perhaps not so good tourism numbers. If you look at the figures in terms of trade and services between Hong Kong and the European Union, that includes all sorts of, it's not only financial services, but all sorts of other services. that is doing particularly well.
Okay.
And I think that's one area that's promising, and I think that should be noted.
And how can we continue that? What are we looking for to boost that?
Well, some of the things I was saying earlier about the overall environment for attracting talent. You know, if you're a bank, you need talent from all over the world, and including Europeans. So that's important too.
Yes, another question over here.
Tony Watson, Far East Investment Management. How has Europe's perception of Hong Kong changed during your time here?
Hong Kong.
Hong Kong's, yeah, Europe's perception of Hong Kong. Well, I sort of mentioned that earlier about the big headlines being about first of all the 2019 protests, then some of the security legislation. These things have taken the headlines. So if you don't follow Hong Kong very much, those are the things which will grab your attention. And so I think that's what people who don't know Hong Kong very well focus on those sorts of things. And then relating to the question of the economy, I think in terms of there is a reputational issue, and you know it takes very little time to damage that reputation, but it takes a long time and a lot of work to build this up again. So that's unfortunately maybe we're seeing a little bit of that in the case of Hong Kong too.
Another question over here.
Thank you. My name is Chen Yan from the BBC's Hong Kong Bureau. And when talk about China, in the past year, the European leaders often use the words de-risking. And my question is, towards Hong Kong, in your case, is de-risking still the policy, or not as much? And my second question is, in the process of de-risking, what did you do in the past few years? Thank you.
What do we do?
Yeah, what did you do?
What did we do? Well, I think the concept of de-risking came because at one point, not the European Union, but others were talking about decoupling, yeah. And it's clear that the global markets are so intertwined that decoupling is just not possible nor desirable. So then we have this concept of de-risking, which actually started coming about during the pandemic, where we found that if you have certain, and here I'm not talking specifically about China, but if you have certain, if you rely on certain markets too much, these could turn into vulnerabilities. And so there are plenty of examples of this, and this really came to the fore in terms of following the pandemic. Then in terms of Hong Kong, I think it's China, Hong Kong vis-a-vis China. I mean, it's the orders of magnitude are very, very different, and the type of economic relationship is very different. So I don't think you can quite compare the two, but I think in general the same approach should be at the forefront of policymakers in terms of when you think about de-risking. When you say de-risking, I think it's what has Europe done? Maybe just to point at and the whole chips issue is I think an important one. So yesterday we saw the opening of what is called ESMC, so European Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation in Germany. And so I think this is just an example of chips in all sorts of products are so fundamental that then you need to make sure you have that capacity within Europe. That is somehow then protected from any eventuality. So I would point to that specific example.
Were there lessons learned during COVID as far as some of that goes as well, as far as the de-risking and having some of the businesses in Europe?
Yeah, for sure. It stemmed from a lot of the Europe's experience during the pandemic. For example, I think we realized that during the pandemic that in Europe, no European Union country produces paracetamol.
Oh, wow.
So that's, you know, an issue of you know, reliance on third countries becoming vulnerabilities. Okay, paracetamol isn't such a high-tech product, but it shows it can be an issue if and such a basic product like paracetamol.
Yes, certainly. Do we have any other questions? Yes. Sarah? Oh, yeah, microphone coming.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I work at IFR. You've sort of addressed this already a little bit in response to the previous question, but I think maybe more looking forward, where do you see Hong Kong's role vis-a-vis China? What is the role that it plays in the context of, for European businesses before, it might have been a gateway to China? With everything that's going on, could they just bypass Hong Kong and set up straight in Shanghai?
Well, I think there will be. I mean, there certainly will still be a very important role for Hong Kong. I think, given what I was saying earlier about the characteristics, if Hong Kong maintains the one country, two systems, at least in the economic sphere, if Hong Kong has a free capital flows, a common law system, a judiciary that's at least in the commercial sphere there's confidence in the judiciary. I think Hong Kong's role will remain very important, including as to access the mainland. Then there will be changes, and again, what I was saying earlier, depending on what company you're talking about, what the specific business is, maybe there are conditions where you say, well, if things are like this, and given the expense of Hong Kong, I might as well move directly to the mainland. But I think this is not the case across the board. Then there are issues relating to, for example, regional headquarters. Mm-hmm. If Hong Kong is used as a regional headquarters by many companies, many European companies, and if we've seen some movement in that respect, but I think again it depends on what type of business you are and the specific conditions, but I think that would remain the role for Hong Kong in terms of playing that role as a regional hub as well. There are other candidates for regional hubs, but so I think Hong Kong will continue to have a very important role for Europe, not only European companies, but Europe in general, for sure.
And when it comes to that regional hub, is it, as Sarah I think alluded to, is still a gateway to China? Is that still the attitude?
Yes, but also a regional hub is to serve the whole of East Asia. But again, it depends on the specifics of your company. If you have concerns about data protection, for example, you could be rethinking this. And some companies are kind of ring fencing the way they treat data, so that this is certainly a consideration for companies.
Any other? Yes, another question over here. We have the microphone coming to you.
Tom, it's great to see you again. Mike Rouse, occasional columnist in the South China Morning Post and RTHK Radio. Tom, I always feel inadequate after you speak on the subject of self-censorship because I don't censor myself and I feel I ought to be doing this more. I won't dwell on this because otherwise you might suggest an area where I might do more than you're expecting. I want to ask you about national security. I find it impossible to talk to Americans now because everything is national security. We won't sell you this because of national security. We won't buy this from you because of national security. We'll ban TikTok because how teenagers dance in a crazy way is national security, and so on and so on and so on and so on. What's the feeling in Europe about national security? Are you worried the PLA going to invade anytime soon? Are there areas that you feel sensitive about on national security?
Well, I think national security is certainly an issue in Europe as well. I think if we see the war in Ukraine, which is a country that borders with 4 member states of the European Union, and the reaction that we're taking, and the reasons why we've taken this very strong position to do all we can to support Ukraine. I think this shows how things which we weren't thinking about only a few years ago suddenly have become much more important. The pandemic has also changed a lot, and what I was mentioning earlier about vulnerabilities in the energy sector, for example, in addition to the ones I mentioned earlier. So this is certainly, these issues are much more at the forefront in terms of thinking in Europe as well. Now, Europe is more complicated. We're a union of 27 member states with an increasing role on security issues and coordination on security issues, which goes beyond, which is coordinated with NATO. Now, not all of our member states are members of NATO, so there's a certain overlap, but certainly these are issues that have come really to the fore, and it's also the analysis of what constitutes security. Just like you spoke about everything being national security. Well, you can, if you look at the Chinese concept of security, which has now been transposed to Hong Kong. You could say the same thing there, that there's Arctic security, there's all sorts of types of security. So I think this is what's the result of the pretty momentous changes which have happened in a very short period of time. And from our perspective, I would say the pandemic, but the war in Ukraine, those are really watershed moments. Yeah.
All right. Thank you all very much. We're just past 2 o'clock, so we are out of time. But I appreciate you all for being here, and especially thank you to Tom for choosing to come to the FCC before you depart. We really appreciate you coming by.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course, you get a FCC
Oh, wow.
present. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Can't leave without that.
Thank you. I haven't done, the container hasn't left yet. So, well, thank you very much.
Yes,
Yeah.
you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.